Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 2 of Buha's Block, my new Lakers podcast. If you did not check out episode 1, I interviewed Austin Reeves and Trent Swaim, aka the dynamic duo behind Hillbilly Bogey. So check that out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Now for this episode, we are going to be talking about 5 ways to fix the Lakers, 5 ways to make them a bit more consistent. Originally, my thought for this episode was going through the 9 different teams in the West playoff and play-in mix and ranking them from best to worst matchup. It was an idea I got from Hoops Tonight with Jason Timpf, and we went through the top 4 teams in the West and ranked them 1 to 4 in terms of best to worst matchup for the Lakers. So figured, why not expand it, look at Lakers' potential play-in opponents. Really, the top 4 is set, but 5 through 10 could end up in any order depending on how the rest of the season goes, and the Lakers could face at least a couple of those teams in the play-in depending on where they finish. But then the Lakers lost to the Kings, and it was a loss that to me was the worst loss of the season. I wrote that, I said that on here in my post-game reaction. I think just given the stakes and given it was a game that the team labeled a must-win, that Darvin Ham labeled essentially a must-win before the game. They come out with that great start, and the second they get punched in the mouth, they just fold and get absolutely crushed in the middle portions of that game, make a couple runs in the second half, but never get closer than 12. And just to me, again, the context and the stakes of that game and the manner in which they lost was embarrassing and inexcusable, and to me, just a terrible loss, and one that now guarantees the Kings win the season series, so they have the tiebreaker. And it's really looking, with the way the rest of the West is playing right now, that the Lakers are likely going to be the number 10 seed. Maybe they could get to number 9. Dallas has lost a few games in a row. They haven't been playing as well lately. But everyone else, like Golden State, has just had a big win against Milwaukee. New Orleans has been playing better. Phoenix just had a big win against Denver. The Kings are obviously playing, they just beat the Lakers, and that kind of puts them at a different level. They're 4 losses ahead of the Lakers in the win-loss column. So things aren't looking great for the Lakers right now. They've been pretty up and down since coming out of the All-Star break. And I want to go through some numbers here because that's going to be the theme of the show. Is I've been doing a deep dive over the last 24 hours into the Lakers numbers, watching some film, and coming up with ideas of how can the Lakers fix this? How can they make this, how can they be their best selves more consistently? And I don't know if any of these things are going to happen. I'm not saying they will, but it's fun to talk about it in theory of just like, what is the way to solve some of the issues that the Lakers keep running into? So quick rundown. Since the All-Star break, the Lakers they played 8 games. They are 4-4 with wins over the Clippers, the Thunder, the Spurs, and the Wizards, and losses to the Warriors without LeBron, the Suns, the Nuggets, and the Kings. They're 8th in offense, 28th in defense, and 21st in net rating. They are tied for the 7th best record in the West with the LA Clippers. And most concerning to me, like the defense is concerning. They've been a bottom 3 defense since the All-Star break. So I thought the defense was bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad. And that contributes to, despite being a top 8 offense, them being 21st in net rating, which is a bottom 10 net rating. But they're 26th in rebound percentage and 23rd in defensive rebound percentage. So they've struggled with rebounding all year, but it's been particularly bad coming out of the break. Part of that is because they haven't had Christian Wood and Jared Vanderbilt, which has compromised their defensive rebounding. It's compromised their defense overall. It's compromised their size, their length. They have been playing smaller just because of the available personnel. But I'm just setting the scene here for kind of what the Lakers are dealing with right now. So again, to recap, 4-4, 26th in rebounding percentage, 8th in offense, 28th in defense, 21st in net rating. So aside from the offense, things have not been going well. So fix number 1 for the Lakers is something I've been clamoring for a majority of the season, is something that I know a lot of fans have been clamoring for. A lot of people covering the team have been clamoring for. It's play bigger. Now, for this lineup data that I'm about to go through, I'm going to ignore Jared Vanderbilt and Christian Wood just because we still don't know their exact timetables. Christian was supposed to be reevaluated this week, so hopefully, we'll get an update on Friday at the game before the tip off against Milwaukee. But without knowing what's going on with those two, I'm just going to put them to the side just because I think like there's a lot of positive numbers with those guys next to LeBron, next to AD, next to Rui, but until we know for certain if those guys are coming back or when they're coming back, I'm not even going to put them in this. But let's go through some of the numbers here. So this is all per Cleaning the Glass, which is a bit more accurate, takes out some of the garbage time stuff. So AD, LeBron, and Rui, plus 4.5 points per 100 possessions. So solid. Jackson, LeBron, and Rui, so that's Jackson subbing in for AD, plus 27.5 points per 100 possessions. So those are typically bench lineups. It's a bench front court, but that's really good. LeBron and Rui together. So that's in some combination of those two at the 4 and the 5, or those two at the 3 and the 4, plus 8.7. Really, really good. AD and Rui. So that's some combination of those two at the 5 and the 4, or those two at the 5 and the 3, plus 1.7. Solid, above average. Jackson and LeBron, plus 2.2, also solid. Not enough sample size with AD and Jackson, so that's one where the numbers actually haven't been great, but it's only been about 100 possessions. So I'm that one. It's tough to say. But now let's look at some of the Lakers' more common used lineups this season. And these are all some of their. I think they're all in like the top 7 in terms of lineups used this year. AD, LeBron, Taurean at the 3, Austin, and D'Lo. So that's the original starting lineup that they went back to recently before ultimately switching back to Rui. Minus 3.4 points per 100 possessions. Same lineup with Cam Reddish in place of Austin Reeves, minus 0.4. Same lineup with Cam in place of D'Lo, minus 9.9. And then same line or the new starting lineup, but with Taurean coming in for LeBron, which has happened at different portions of since the new starting lineup of Rui at small forward, minus 4.3. So what are the trends there? Well, all 4 lineups have Taurean Prince at the 3, and that has been among some of the Lakers' worst lineups this season. Has been Taurean at the 3, and actually Taurean at the 2 too. We'll get into Taurean later, but some common trends there. So looking at it more specifically by player, Cam Reddish at the 3, minus 10.7 points per 100 possessions. That's really, really bad. Taurean, minus 4.2. Max Christie at the 3, plus 14. Now, much smaller sample size than those two, but Max at the 3 has actually worked. He's been the one guard that has been able to scale up and defend wings and rebound well and space the floor and like do all the things that Max does. Now looking at it, Cam has actually been much better at the 2. So when Cam can overwhelm smaller guards and leverage his length, and he doesn't have to take on some of those bigger guys, plus 5.6 with Cam on the floor at the 2. And then Taurean is still a minus 4.8. So he's actually been better at the 3 than the 2 in terms of net rating. But I know I number dumped a lot of data on you guys, but the theme essentially is if you look at the front court combinations, the Lakers are much better when it's Rui at the 3, LeBron at the 3, or Max Christie at the 3. In the scenarios that are positive for Taurean at the 3, it's been Max Christie at the 2 or Cam at the 2, meaning that he needs another defensive wing out there to kind of flank him and take those primary assignments. But essentially, any other combination or version of Taurean at the 3 with 2 non-defenders in the backcourt and essentially putting Taurean as like that main guy, those lineups have all been negative. So I think it's pretty clear like what's worked and what hasn't. The numbers are stark. There's clear trends on both sides where the Lakers just play bigger with more size in that front court. They're better. They play smaller. They're worse. It's that simple. I get that right now they are limited with no Christian Wood and no Jared Vanderbilt, but I think the goal for the Lakers should be to have at least 2 of AD, Rui, LeBron, and Jackson Hayes on the floor at all times. And in the cases that they don't play 2 of those guys at the same time, AD needs to be the guy on the floor. And I think you could maybe get away with some LeBron Rui tandem, but again, now you're putting two guys, not one. But any version that's like Jackson at the 5 with Taurean at the 4, or LeBron at the 5 with Taurean at the 4, or Rui at the 5 with Taurean at the 4, those lineups have all been bad. So if the Lakers are going to downsize and play some of these Taurean at the 4 lineups, which have actually been better than I thought by the eye test, but I'll get into why in a little bit. It's got to be like if they're going with one big, the lone big has to be AD. Otherwise, it has to be at least 2 of those other guys, if not 3, ideally. So the lineup data bears that out all season. It continues to bear it out post All-Star break. And I think the Lakers need to play bigger. It helps them defensively. It helps them on the defensive glass. It makes them tougher to match up with. As we've seen, this new starting lineup, Rui Hachimura always has a mismatch. Teams are going to game plan for LeBron and AD leaving. I mean, Kevin Huerter was guarding Rui Hachimura for stretches of that Kings game, and that's just a blatant mismatch. The data is clear. The Lakers need to play bigger. All right, fix number 2 is feed Anthony Davis more. And this is a hot button issue right now because Anthony Davis just had one of his worst games of the season against the Kings. He had 14 points, was 5 for 13 from the floor, was thoroughly outplayed by Domantas Sabonis, who is now 9-0 against AD head-to-head. And it's continued this trend of him struggling against big, bruising, skilled big men, many of whom come from Europe. But Jokic, Sabonis, Nurkic, Valanciunas, Şengün, Zubats, like I could go on and on, but like those big guys they're all about 7 feet, between 6'11" and above, all weigh 260 plus. Like they all give AD problems, and Sabonis has actually probably given him the most problems outside of Jokic, and that's kind of been surprising just given his frame. I think he's the smallest of all those guys. At least from like a physical profile standpoint, but he's really given AD issues. Now, with that said, I think the Lakers have gone away from AD more than they should have coming out of the break. It's been a lot of just using him as a screener, using him as a decoy, trying to use him as a passing hub, which he's capable of, but I think it takes away some of his strengths offensively. It turns him way more into a finisher than a creator. And let's look at some of the numbers here. So since the All-Star break, AD's usage and assist percentage have declined, and he's scoring and shooting slightly less. It's pretty similar. So like ebbs and flows. It's an 8-game sample size. Like that tends to happen. But if you look at particularly his shots in the paint, but outside the restricted area. So inside the restricted area, he's actually been slightly better since the All-Star break, and his mid-range jumper has actually been slightly better since the All-Star break as well. But his in the paint. So those are those hook shots, the kind of spinning fades in the middle, those floaters, and a lot of the looks that he gets as the roll man in the pick and roll, if he's kind of stopping short and not going to the rim. Those are those shots in like the 6 to 12 foot range inside the paint or just on kind of like the outskirts. He's dropped from 46.4% to 35.1%. So that is a significant drop. Again, relatively small sample, but you saw that in that Sacramento game. You saw it in the Denver game. He missed a bunch of those shots. He missed a bunch of the runners and the floaters, the hook shots, etc. So that's been an area that AD has struggled in. And I think in going back, I've went back and watched on Synergy every one of AD's offensive possessions that ended with him, taking a shot, getting fouled, or turning the ball over. And in going back and looking at those, it's just been a lot of stagnation with the Lakers offense. And it's been a lot of AD getting the ball in the post or in the mid post and ISOing, facing up and ISOing or trying to back someone down. And the other 4 guys are just standing around and watching. And it makes it tougher for AD because now you can shade over. You can send a double or you can aggressively shade over with a couple of guys and help. And it also just allows that guy to kind of play him one-on-one, knowing where the other guys are around him and being confident in funneling him or shading him a certain direction. So I think the Lakers, when AD has the ball, And D'Lo's been pretty good at this overall, especially recently of just, doing some back cutting and, the constant motion. Like that was something that Vando was starting to figure out before he got injured. LeBron can be good at this when he's engaged off the ball, but like the Lakers just need some more second side, weak side, off ball action and movement around AD when he has the ball in the post or the elbow or just kind of in that general area. But the other thing is like, I think the Lakers can run just a lot more stuff to get him in motion. And that's where you see AD's the most devastating and the most unstoppable, in my opinion, is like when you could get him downhill and having to leverage his size and athleticism either against a smaller defender or against a help defender. That's stack actions, Spain pick and roll. Against the Thunder, for example, the Lakers leveraged him as a ball handler in pick and roll. So they had Austin or LeBron screen for him, and that either drew a switch, or if he swung the ball, then all of a sudden like Shea was switched on to him or Lou Dort. So then he would go into the post. So like the Lakers can get more creative with ways to open up and unlock Anthony Davis. And to me, it's not just let's run a post up, let's run an ISO. Like that stuff's working when he's in rhythm, when he's in a certain flow and he's feeling it. But when AD very much, I think AD and D'Lo are probably the two most rhythm-based players on this team. You can kind of tell within the first few shots, like whether they have it or not. And I think that the one way to break through that a lot of times is getting easy buckets. And against the Kings, everything was hard. There was a drive and dish from LeBron. There was a couple fast break points of just getting out in transition, deep seals, offensive rebounds. But like everything within a half court setting was very difficult against the Kings. And Sabonis and Alex Len were able to just bother him with their size and their strength, and him just not being able to take them off the dribble or in the post. And part of that's on AD, and part of that's got to be him playing more aggressively, more assertively, him playing with more force, him not, playing through contact, him not just trying to draw fouls in certain situations. Like part of it's on AD. I'm not absolving him here, but I also think the Lakers have a tendency with how much perimeter firepower they have with LeBron, with D'Lo, with Austin, with Spencer, even with some of the with Rui, with even a guy like Taurean who comes in and will take a few shots. Like the ball can sometimes just go away from AD for too long of stretches. And this has been a problem for the Lakers for multiple seasons now. And really, I think it became more of a problem last year, but there would be these stretches where second half, fourth quarter, like AD doesn't get the ball. And you saw that in the Denver game. He only had 2 shots in the fourth. You saw that at times in the Sacramento game. And part of that was foul trouble. And there's different circumstances around it. But to me, I think the Lakers, like AD, because he's not handling the ball the way a Jokic or Embiid or Giannis is, like sometimes those guys will bring the ball up the floor. And AD can do that. He's done it before, but it's more of a rare occurrence. And the Lakers don't use him as a ball handler as much as they probably could or should. And a lot of times it is, AD is dependent on the pick and roll ball handler hitting him with a pocket pass or hitting him with a lob, or LeBron, D'Lo, Austin driving and dishing to him, or those guys, getting the proper angle and positioning to hit him with an entry pass, especially if a team is fronting like Sacramento did a lot. So like some of it is on AD. And again, I thought that he settled a lot in that Sacramento game. He did settle a bit as well in that Denver game. But part of it is also on the coaching staff and the offensive organization. And part of it's also on his teammates setting him up and putting him in the right positions. And then also when he has the ball, being active off of it to optimize his skill set. But again, I think Lakers could do way more AD on the ball. LeBron comes screen for him. Austin comes screen for him. D'Lo comes screen for him. They could do more stack action, Spain pick and rolls, like getting him in motion, getting back screens for him, getting him toward the rim. Like there are creative ways that they've been successful in generating offense for AD that they just don't do consistently, and they go away from far too often. So run him off pin downs. Like they've stopped running some of those actions where he comes off a screen and he's curling or he's popping and part of it's a jumper too. Like that's another thing where he's not shooting the ball as well as in years past. And that's certainly a factor, but I just think that the Lakers got to get AD going more consistently. All right. So fix number 3 for the Lakers is play Taurean Prince fewer minutes if not phase him out of the rotation entirely. Now, I know that's difficult with no Wood and no Vando. I think if those guys were available, Taurean probably just shouldn't be playing. It's hard to not play him given the current rotation. But I think the Lakers could get by with just more Max Christie, he's been basically phased out of the rotation since coming back from his ankle injury. He had the one game against the Warriors where he played 28 minutes. He had the next game against the Spurs, which was a back-to-back, only played 13. I assume that was just because he had just come off an injury. It was a back-to-back. He played a lot the night before. Maybe Darvin was being cautious with him. But then he's basically not played since then outside of garbage time. Did play 11 minutes against the Kings. I thought was solid. Hit a big 3 in the fourth quarter as the Lakers are making that run. But comparing like his defense to Taurean's defense, it's just not even comparable. And the fact that the Lakers were putting Taurean on Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox for stretches of that game, stretches that the Kings were going on that run, it just did not make any sense to me. And again, I think there's kind of been a misuse of Taurean. There's been a misuse of Max. And I also think if you really want, if Max, for whatever reason, doesn't have the trust of or confidence of the coaching staff, go more Spencer, because the 3-guard lineups actually with Spencer, Austin, and D'Lo, I have it right here, plus 7.6 points per 100 possessions with those 3 players on the floor together. And some of that has been with Taurean at the 4. I didn't isolate it, depending on that, but like for the most part, it's actually been with Rui and AD. That's been the most common lineup configuration with those 3 guards, and like play more of that. I don't, and Cam, I think could also have some value depending on the matchup. I think has to be the right matchup, but he didn't play against the Kings. We never got clarification as to why, but I'm going to go through some of the Taurean facts here just to lay out the case of why he's been arguably the most detrimental player in the rotation this season. So on the season, Taurean has the worst plus minus on the Lakers at minus 142, which is 54 points worse than the second worst player, which is Austin, who's at minus 88. And this has been a stat that's been circulating, so I'm going to update you on it. LA is 16-4 when Taurean plays under 25 minutes. Now that includes the 3 games that he missed, which they went 2-1 in. So I guess if you want to do it games he's played in 25 or fewer minutes, they're 14-3. But overall, including the games they haven't had him, they're 16-4, which is obviously really good. So conversely, if you look at the opposite end of that, they are 18-26, 8 games under 500 when he plays 25 or more minutes. So again, some of this stuff is very clear, very obvious. It's empirical data. It is fact. It is not feelings. And then looking at starting, the Lakers are 10-5 when Taurean does not start. Again, that includes the games he's missed. And they're 24-25, 1 game under 500 when he does start. So again, they're clearly in favor of Taurean coming off the bench and playing under 25 minutes. That's kind of been the Mendoza line for success with Taurean in the lineup. Now, a positive for Taurean has been Taurean at the 4 has actually been much more effective than Taurean at the 3 and Taurean at the 2. Again, I said some of those numbers. He's a minus 4.2 at the 3 and a minus 4.8 at the 2. But actually at the 4, he's been a plus 9.1 points. The Lakers have been plus 9.1 points per 100 possessions with Taurean at the 4. So those lineups have actually worked. But the most used version has been AD, Taurean, Cam, Austin, and D'Lo. So that's basically in the first and third quarters, the Lakers sub out LeBron and Rui, and they bring in Cam and Taurean. That's been a trend post All-Star break. And those lineups are minus 15.9 points per 100 possessions. So those lineups have been getting killed. And I mean, just hasn't been working. And those have been the stretches, I think, where fans have gotten frustrated and have noticed that the Taurean at the 4 hasn't been good. Although, again, small sample size, but it's actually been a net positive overall. But the key to Taurean at the 4, I don't think the Lakers should do it. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it makes sense. He's 7th on the team in rebounds, and that's rebounds per game since the All-Star break. He's 7th in rebounds per 100 possessions. So and 7th in rebound percentage. So Taurean is guard, like Austin is a better rebounder than Taurean. Cam is a better rebounder than Taurean. Like, he's actually rebounded better than Rui and better than D'Lo. So that's a plus when comparing him to those guys. But like, for the most part, he has not rebounded like a power forward. He's barely rebounded like a small forward. I mean, he's really rebounded more like a point guard. And the fact that the Lakers continue to play him at power forward, like that, there's a reason why they've been getting killed on the glass, and that's been part of it. But if the Lakers are going to continue to play Taurean at the 4, because I think they will, I don't see him being phased out of the rotation, and I don't see Darvin stopping, playing him at the 4. Taurean needs AD, because here's the splits with AD at the 5 and Taurean at the 4 versus Taurean at the 4 without AD. With AD at the 5, lineups with Taurean at the 4 are plus 11.2 points per 100 possessions. Really good, and that's what's carrying that plus 9.1 overall. Without AD at the 5, the lineups with Taurean at the 4 are minus 6.8 points per 100 possessions. Terrible. Really bad. So that's a split there of like, if you're going to go Taurean at the 4, again, you need AD in there as like the all-world enforcer, defender. You need him at center. If you're going Jackson or you're going LeBron or Rui, it doesn't make sense. And like we've seen a little bit of that, and those lineups have been killed. So again, even with AD at the 5, as I just mentioned, the lineup with Cam and Austin and D'Lo hasn't done well, but it's a requirement of, if you're going to play Taurean at the 4, AD has to be out there. Looking at the data again, Taurean has tended to play better in bigger lineups. So one of the few positive lineups with him at shooting guard has been Rui at the 3 in a bigger lineup configuration. Or if Taurean's at the 3, Cam and Max are at the 2. So you have that plus perimeter defender at shooting guard who could take on those assignments, and it doesn't fall on Taurean. But in basically all other configurations, Taurean is a net negative at the 2 and at the 3. So since the All-Star break, I'm taking out the OKC game because that was a bit of an outlier. That was his best game in weeks. And maybe that's not fair, but looking outside the OKC game, he's shooting 31.8% on threes. He's really been struggling as a shooter. There was a stretch there where he only took a couple threes over a span of, I think, about 3 games. Maybe he took like 3. And clearly his confidence has been affected a little bit. But he's also a minus 39 outside of the OKC game. So the OKC game, he was a plus 29, which brought him up to a minus 10. He was a part of some of those great bench lineups that skewed a lot of these numbers, because, again, looking at the other 7 games, there have been some clear trends that the OKC game, because of small sample size, sort of affected things. But like basically outside of that OKC game, Taurean has been borderline unplayable. He has not been shooting the ball well. He's not been rebounding the ball well. He's not been defending well. And the Lakers have been losing most of the lineups that he's played in. So I think it's at the point where I know it was a big step for Darvin to take him out of the starting lineup. I know it's been a big step for Darvin to play him fewer minutes, which, to Darvin's credit, it's progressively decreased in terms of Taurean's role and his minutes. But at this point, he statistically continues to be arguably the worst player in the Lakers rotation. And when looking at what the Lakers need and what he's providing right now, I think you can get more out of playing Spencer more in 3-guard lineups, or just playing Max, which I think is the answer. I think the answer is just Max takes Taurean's minutes. I think the Lakers get better point of attack defense, honestly comparable 3-point shooting, and a guy who isn't going to take some of the shots that Taurean will occasionally take, and also a much better rebounder and just a more active, energetic guy who's been a part of more positive lineups. So I think to me, the answer is play Max more. I don't think that's going to happen, because I think that should have been the case a while ago, and that just hasn't happened. But again, looking at the numbers season long and recently, this has been Taurean's worst stretch of the season, these last 8 games or so. And maybe he turns it around. Maybe this is just a bad stretch for whatever reason. But again, looking at the plus minus, looking at the rebounding, looking at the lineup data, like Taurean has been a very detrimental player within the Lakers rotation. And I think it's time for him to finally be phased out, especially with, again, Lakers have 18 games to figure this out. It's not about feelings or connection to a player or familiarity or like all these other things. It's about production. It's about the data. It's about the results. And they're just not there. And they haven't been there for a majority of the season. Really since like early to mid-December, he has fallen off as a productive role player and a productive defender, which he had some pretty good moments. I mean, there were games early in the season. He hit multiple threes. He had, 15 to 20 point scoring games. He had some solid defensive performances by the numbers. And like, I think even then his role was probably a little bit too big, but Rui was in and out of the lineup. Vando was out. Like it was more defensible. But now that we've seen how the Lakers play with Rui as a starter, we've seen how they play with Vando back to full strength before his injury. It's just like those two guys are just so much better than him and should be playing such larger roles. And then again, looking at what Max has been able to do in limited sample sizes, what even Cam has been able to do. Cam is offensively has a lot of challenges, but like defensively is just, he's at least a better defender and provides a certain skill set that is tangible that I just don't see Taurean providing right now. So that's my fix number 3. This might be the least realistic of all of them because I just don't see Darvin benching him, but I think it has to happen. Okay, so fix number 4 for the Lakers is more of a philosophical one, but it's adjust faster in games, especially defensively. And I think this is something that has cost the Lakers in multiple games recently. I think their 3 most recent losses have all featured a variation of this. So Phoenix game, the Lakers enter trapping, doubling, blitzing Booker and KD. And in theory, it makes sense. Like they're down some of their best defenders. There's no Cam in that game. There's no Vando. There's no Gabe. Okay. So like in theory, I get it. You don't want to leave Rui on an island with KD. You don't want to leave Austin or D'Lo on an island with Devin Booker, even a guy like Spencer or Taurean. Okay. But the problem is, as we saw, now all of a sudden, because you have 2 guys on the ball, you have 3 guys dealing with the other 4 guys. And that led to a slew of open threes for Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal, who each hit 6. And then that also led to Yusuf Nurkic just obliterating your wings and guards with offensive rebounds and putbacks and fouls drawn, etc. So that was a situation I think the Lakers needed to counter at some point, and they didn't really. There were times where they just played more conservatively and played one-on-one. But the Suns continually beat them in the same ways in that game. And it was almost as if, and we've seen this at times, like I think about the Dallas game back in December, where they just let Dante Exum shoot a bunch of open threes and like eventually started taking a couple steps in his direction. But like this has been a trend for the Lakers of they come in with a defensive game plan and they almost are looking at the numbers or looking at like this was the plan. We think this is going to be successful. We're going to keep betting that the odds are going to eventually turn in our favor. And then they have in certain matchups, but then in the matchups they don't. It gets really ugly and they lose those games. And then it looks like, well, why did you leave Dante Exum open for all these threes? Or why did you continually double off Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal and get those guys in a certain rhythm? And why are you having D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves and Taurean Prince battle Yusuf Nurkic under the glass instead of inserting Jackson Hayes and playing double big lineups or sticking with your bigger front court? Rui, I think, only played 26 minutes in that game. So like Rui ended up kind of getting benched. Like that was probably the worst Taurean at the 4 game of them all because again, he's not a good rebounder. So that was one example, but like I could go down the list of Denver. Lakers stayed defending Jokic with Rui one-on-one. I felt for too long in that game. And pretty much any time Jokic got within about like 10 feet, he was scoring. And then Cam on Murray for too long in crunch time, where Murray was continually scoring on Cam. And you also had the weird situation where you couldn't switch the Jokic-Murray pick and roll with Rui and Cam because you didn't want Cam on Jokic. There was that one possession, Jokic got it at the elbow against Cam, switched on to him, just backs him down, lofts in a soft floater. And then Rui, you don't want him on Murray just because of the foot speed and Rui's perimeter defense, overall. So I thought the Lakers misplayed that situation and just their approach to the 2-man game. I've said it, like I think one thing they could try is AD on Jokic, LeBron on Murray. I know that's something they tried in the 2020 Western Conference Finals and had some success with, and like just switch that. And those are the two guys best equipped to match up with those two guys. And then that keeps two in the action. And like, again, Murray's going to get to the rim. He's going to hit tough shots. Jokic is going to hit tough shots. He's going to score over LeBron. He's going to score over AD. Like, that's just how it goes. That's how great those two are as a tandem. But I think going with a lesser player in Cam over D'Lo, which I will touch on in my next fix, it wasn't working defensively. And I think that was another situation where the Lakers didn't really adapt. Then the Sacramento game, they stayed in this deep drop, which to me, in theory, given Sacramento's speed, like I could kind of understand, like you're going under screens, you're hoping to turn Fox and Monk into jump shooters more so than, leveraging, you're leveraging against their speed and trying to keep them on the perimeter rather than letting them get into the paint. But it didn't work. Fox still got into the paint, had 16 makes in the paint, scored 32 points in the paint, tied his career high with 44 points. Malik Monk also did that. Part of that was Taurean Prince having to guard primarily Monk, but also Fox a little bit, which again, like Taurean for his strength, if you want to make the case for his strengths defensively, it's not guarding quick guards. It is guarding, like I thought he's had some decent moments against like KD, for example, this season. There are times where KD's just shot over him, but like that's a guy where he can kind of get into his legs, get into his body, and just kind of bother him a little bit. Where we've seen like that's the blueprint for KD. That's why a guy like Pat Beverly has had some success against him. So Taurean could do like some of those things, but when it's an actual like foot speed, athleticism, explosion thing, that is not Taurean's strength defensively. And the game plan of having him try to navigate screens, which he struggles with, but also trying to do that on an island basically with no AD or Jackson Hayes in the action, like it just didn't really make sense. And the Lakers never really countered. Like there were some moments where they brought Jackson and AD a bit higher, but you sort of neutralized what those guys are good at. Like Jackson is a mobile, switchy, versatile big who can make plays on the perimeter. AD can do everything, but treating him almost like Brook Lopez and just having him stand near the rim, like it just led to Fox and Monk walking into a bunch of wide open pull-up mid-range jumpers, floaters, runners, and then when AD started to cheat up a little bit and almost go against the game plan at certain times, then they were able to blow by him and they were already in a rhythm. So one trend with all three of these things is like, I think the Lakers need to trust AD more defensively and just what he can do and stop with some of the overhelping, stop with playing him a little bit too conservatively and treating him like a Brook Lopez or I'm using that example because Darvin came from the Budenholzer system in Milwaukee. But AD kind of talked about this and I thought it didn't get enough play, but he was on D'Angelo Russell's podcast, the Backyard podcast, and he was talking about his defense and he was pumping himself up and talking about how good he is on the defensive end. But within that, he talked about how he feels like he, can do more defensively and that coaches sometimes don't have like the full trust or confidence in him to do as much as he actually can on the defensive end. And reading between the lines, I think it was kind of a message being sent of he would like to do more and not be treated or put in a box rather, and said, this is how we're going to defend certain things. And like, I think the Lakers should leverage him on the perimeter more. I think they could put him on a Kevin Durant. They could put him on a Kawhi Leonard. I know it's going to draw him away from the rim, but that's also where if you play a Jackson Hayes or you go LeBron and Rui and you just have more collective size on the back line, like you can probably get away with that. I just think that they've been a little too slow to adjust, if they even adjust, period. Like there were signs in all those games in the first and second quarters that strategy was not working, and yet they continue to deploy it. And that to me is like, at some point you need to adjust. And again, this is a more philosophical thing than an empirical thing. But if you go back and watch the film, there were subtle adjustments within those games, but it wasn't enough and it wasn't soon enough as well. So I think that's something that the coaching staff needs to improve on. Finally, fix number 5 is more D'Lo in the clutch. And what sparked this idea for me was the Denver game. Now, I did say in my post-game reaction for those who watched it on YouTube that I wasn't sure. D'Lo had a pretty rough third quarter. He had a really good first half. To me, that was his best half of basketball against the Nuggets in the 7 matchups. But then he started the game 5 for 7, 13 points, is playing really well offensively. And then from that point on goes 1 for 6, only scores 4 points, starts to rush a little bit in the third. Denver's able to get him out of his rhythm, and you see him just taking shots a little quicker than normal. And again, D'Lo, I mentioned it earlier, like he's very much a rhythm player. He's very much, he calls it the flow state. And like you can tell when he's in the flow state, and you could also tell when he's not in the flow state. And it just takes one shot for him to get back into it. But sometimes it can snowball, where I think part of the reason why D'Lo gets criticized as much as he does is because when he's out of the flow state, it can really snowball. And all of a sudden it's 1 for 5, it's 1 for 6, it's 1 for 7, and it's a turnover. And then he's not providing much defensively in certain matchups. So like, that's where it starts to kind of spiral. And all of a sudden, like what was a good D'Lo first half kind of turns into a really bad third quarter that undermines a lot of what he was doing well in the game. So I know from the Lakers perspective, like there was some concern on bringing him back in a prominent role in the fourth quarter, and like whether he could handle the moment, whether Denver just kind of has his number, similar to Denver just kind of having the Lakers number overall. But like, I think with the exception of like Denver might just be an exception where it's just a bad matchup for him. And like, he's just tended not to play well against them. But in general, the Lakers, so I'm going to go through some numbers here. Lakers are 18-8 in clutch games this season, which is the best win percentage in the league. They have the best record in clutch games in the league. I don't know if you know that. I didn't even know that until I just looked this up. Tied for third most wins in the league. And then of that 18-8 record, the Lakers are 12-2 in the games that D'Lo has played in, and 6-6 without him. And also, because I thought of this, like how many of those games that he hasn't played in were due to injury. So he's missed 5 games, and only one of them went into the clutch, which was the trade deadline game against the Denver Nuggets. Otherwise, the other 4 games were not clutch games. But in the clutch, D'Lo, aside from having the best record as a Laker in terms of just looking at the primary guys, team best plus 2.2 plus minus per game. And then also the second best in that rating in the clutch at plus 13.0 behind Cam, who's a plus 15.8. With D'Lo, I think at this point, like, yes, he's flawed. Yes, sometimes the shot selection isn't great. Yes, again, sometimes he's just as cold as he is hot. And he goes through these stretches where he will go 1 for 4, 1 for 6, 2 for 7, whatever. But the results have been there in crunch time. He does have a resume of hitting big baskets and clutch shots. And I think it just gives the Lakers another catch and shoot option, another weak side guy, and just another threat out there where sometimes the crunch time offense can gum up. It can just be a lot of LeBron pick and roll, LeBron ISO, AD ISO, and the Lakers don't run their best stuff necessarily in crunch time. And it kind of devolves into just ISO heavy basketball, which is basically the Lakers' worst version of themselves offensively. And look, the results are there. Like, again, they're 18-8 and they are 6-6 without D'Lo, but they are 12-2 in those. And I didn't go through like, how many minutes did he play in each one. I think his average was around like 4 minutes. So 5 minutes in clutch time. So 4 of the 5. So he is playing a majority of those clutch times. But I just think sometimes there's been a tendency to overthink things in terms of like closing and what's the best lineup. And I think more often than not, it's just the starting group. And maybe there's a matchup where the Lakers need Cam or Max defensively. Of course, Vando if he comes back. And maybe there's a matchup where they need to go bigger and it's Christian and it's a too big look or whatever. But I think at this point, it should be D'Lo and Austin in most cases closing together. And yes, you're at a defensive disadvantage, but I think Austin's defense has been much better since the All-Star break. I thought he did a really good job against the Aaron Fox. I thought he did a really good job against Shea in going back and watching those defensive possessions. And like Austin is playing at a level defensively that we haven't seen from him this season. And really going back to like earlier last season and like parts of his rookie season. Like I think it's been that long since we've seen this high of a level. So that's a credit to him. But I think with him defending like that, you can probably get away with D'Lo in most matchups. So I just think that the data really shows like D'Lo has been Lakers, like he's one of the plus minus leaders. Lakers have been better with him on the floor than off of it consistently since he arrived in LA. And I know that, again, there are defensive flaws and there are some streaky shooting that come with him. But to me, he's the Lakers' third or fourth best player on a given night, and he should be among the closers. So to recap my 5 fixes for the Lakers over these final 18 plus games, because I'm assuming they're going to play in at least one play-in game. Number 1, play bigger. Bigger's been better for this team. Bigger front courts, bigger lineups, like play bigger. Number 2, feed AD more. Find creative ways to get him on the move to the rim. Number 3, play Taurean Prince less and play Max and or Spencer more. Number 4, adjust the defensive game plan faster in games. And number 5, play D'Angelo Russell more in crunch time. So at the end of each solo episode, I'm going to be doing a mailbag. And for future reference, I posted this on Twitter in case some of you missed it. If you want me to answer one of your questions at the end of a solo show during the mailbag portion, all you have to do is send me a screenshot that you've either subscribed to my YouTube channel, followed me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, downloaded an episode of Buha's Block, and or rated and reviewed with a 5-star review. So if you do one of those 4 things and send that in a screenshot form with a question, I will answer it in the upcoming mailbag portion. So thank you for those that submitted. I think a lot of people were kind of confused on that because I got a bunch of questions, but they did not come with a screenshot. They did not come with the accompanying question. So I'm going to address the ones who did it correctly. And then for future reference, just so you guys know. So first question is from Vincent W at homie_2cent. Hey, Jovan, happy to have you as my Laker pod rotation. Why do you think Darvin always skews towards playing small when the Lakers' strengths are size and dominating the paint? It's a good question. And my theory, I don't know. And I've talked to people around the team about this, and it's something that people don't have a great answer for. Like, one of the theories is that he does come from the Mike Budenholzer coaching tree. And if you look at Milwaukee and the way that they closed games, important games during the playoffs at various times, and just during the regular season, like I wasn't following Milwaukee on a day-to-day basis as closely as I did during playoff games. And like I covered that finals between the Suns and the Bucks. So like some of those games, they did have a tendency to go smaller with, like, say, Drew Holiday, Dante DiVincenzo, and Pat Connaughton. And I know DiVincenzo wasn't on the team then, but like just kind of during that run, like that was a group you would see. And like sometimes you would see them go with 3-guard lineups to close in crucial moments. And that was something we saw last year with the Lakers, where pre-trade deadline, there were stretches where they closed with some variation of Russell Westbrook, Dennis Schroeder, Pat Beverly, Lonnie Walker, even Austin as like technically the 3. It's a smaller lineup, 3-guard lineup. And then in the playoffs, there's plenty of Dennis, D'Lo, and Austin. Before LeBron came back from, when LeBron was out, that was a very effective trio for the group. And then this season, I consider Taurean more of a guard than a forward. So like I truly think like Taurean, Austin, and D'Lo is a 3-guard lineup. And we did see a little bit of it when Gabe was healthy, of D'Lo, Gabe, and Austin. And then of course, more recently, we've seen Spencer, Austin, and D'Lo. So I think it's more of a coaching philosophy thing, where I think when a coach's back is against the wall and they have to make a decision, I think they tend to, that reveals their, core coaching philosophy. And clearly for Darvin, he likes relying on multiple guards, multiple ball handlers, speed, shooting. I mean, even though the Lakers don't take a lot of threes, that comes more from like the Milwaukee school of thought of shooting the threes, spacing out. Like, I think there are some positives within that, but I also think Milwaukee ultimately had, like, it's different when Drew Holiday is one of your 3 guards out there. It's different when even a DiVincenzo or a Connaughton, or like I'm feel like I'm blanking on some of the other Bucks guys that closed in those stretches over the years. But some of those guys were plus defenders, and they were scrappy, and they played bigger than their size, and they were plus rebounders, and they could guard up. Lakers haven't had that as much. Like before the trade deadline, they last year they kind of had that, where like Russ is actually better at guarding 2s and 3s than he is 1s. Dennis could defend either backcourt spot. Pat Beverly was actually also better at defending up. Lonnie and Austin were more like 1s and 2s. And then, eventually they switched to D'Lo. But like last year's group, it actually kind of made a little bit more sense given thinking back on some of the wing options. It was like JTA and Troy Brown and Malik Beasley. And like those guys weren't playing at a high enough level to necessarily warrant playing over some of the guards in 3-guard lineups, although some of the 3-guard lineups were terrible. But I just think it's a coaching philosophy thing. It's a comfort thing. It's just clearly what he believes in to some extent. Like some coaches trend bigger and they like to play more size. Some coaches like to play smaller. Some coaches are more in the middle and adaptable. And to me, we now have, it's only been 2 seasons, but we now have a sample size of when he has the choice or when it's the slightly more attractive option, like he will not hesitate and go with playing more guards. And sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. I think it has not worked more than it has, particularly just given the Lakers personnel, especially this year, with not having as great of guard options defensively. But that's my read on the situation. That's also an informed take and talking to people around the team. But like no one has, I don't think he's ever really laid it out clearly to anybody. I think that's just like his own philosophy that has bore out as he's been in these situations where he has to make these decisions. Question number 2 is from George at George Santiago. What do you think the Lakers do on non-game days when there's no practice? Is it true that all teams need to have media availability if they have practice or shoot around? So yes, it is true that if a team has a practice or a shoot around, they have to have a media availability. Now, it depends on what it is. It depends on who speaks. So if it's a practice, the head coach has to speak, and then typically 2 to 3 players. If it's a shoot around, the head coach does not speak at home. On the road, it's optional. And then we typically speak with 1 to 2 players at a home or road shoot around. Now, there are some loopholes where you could technically say you're off and have like an informal practice. You could, have a walkthrough at the Lakers often will not have a shoot around, but they'll have a walkthrough where they meet a couple hours before the game or an hour and a half before the media typically gets there. And they basically have a closed practice right before the game, and then they don't have to do availability. So there are some loopholes around it. Lakers aren't the only team that does that. Other teams do it as well. Like teams are smart with how they can get out of media availability sometimes. But for the Lakers, what they often have on their off days is called a get what you need day, which basically is come in and get shots in, get treatment, work on whatever you want to work on with the assistant coach that, each assistant coach works with, and some of the player development guys, like they each work with like 2, 3, 4 guys, depending on the position and the person's background and whatnot. And so they come in, get some skill work. They'll work on their ball handling. They'll work on their shooting, free throws, moves, etc. Get some treatment with the strength and conditioning team, with the medical team, with the masseuses and all that stuff. And sort of, so it's like essentially a practice. Technically, like they're not supposed to do formal scrimmaging, and they could also get some film work in there and work with people. So like, it's kind of all the practice stuff without like the meat of it in terms of like scrimmaging, and like, Darvin can be there, but he's not really supposed to be like organizing stuff. It's kind of like this gray area in that sense. Like the Lakers they are around each other and together more in a practice sense than like they might lead on, and then it might sound like, just because there are so few practices. But there are a lot of get what you need days. And then part of that also is the stay ready group, which are the guys who aren't playing, typically the younger guys like JHS, Maxwell Lewis, and maybe some of the fringe, like Jackson Hayes, some of the fringe guys in the rotation. They'll play with a mix of the two-way guys, and then sometimes even the assistant coaches or player development guys will join them and they kind of have this mosh pit of people, NBA players, two-way guys, coaches, player development, and they're all playing together. And it's really just about getting reps, talking through concepts. They'll stop possessions and kind of go through like, this is what you should have done. And I actually think that's really cool. And that's something that as the NBA has expanded their staffs and really broken it down into multiple assistants, multiple video guys, multiple player development guys, like you're able to work with players in more specific ways. And I think that's been something that's been great for player development. And it's been something that's like one of the few times we get to watch them scrimmage is like, we'll see the stay ready groups after practice, sometimes after shoot around, not as frequent, just because it's a game day, but like typically after practice, there'll be some version of the stay ready group. And that's always been a very informative watch for me, just observing what guys are doing, what they're preaching, what they're working on, and just, learning and watching that. And finally, question number 3 from friend of the show, Nick Atanackovic. How does it make you feel knowing the Sacramento Kings are better than the Los Angeles Lakers? Well, I have no dog in the fight. I try to be objective. I'm not a fan. I've said that. Like I try to be in the middle. It is better for me when the Lakers do better. Technically, like going on the Western Conference Finals run was great for me, great for my career. So like, I get to do my job longer. Like I love what I do. So there's always a benefit to the team you cover doing well. So from that perspective, Lakers doing better is ultimately better for me, but I don't root for them. I just try to remain objective, call it like I see it, and give you guys the information that I'm getting from other people, the information that I'm observing on the scene, the information of just me being around basketball now for 12 years, being in locker rooms for 12 years, talking to players, coaches, agents, scouts, etc., front office people. But I will say this, I think the Lakers are better than the Kings, but it is a bad matchup. And it's a bad matchup because, again, Sabonis has outplayed AD head-to-head now for years. And Fox has killed the Lakers. He's averaging 36 points against them, 36 points per game against them in the 3 matchups. Monk has killed the Lakers since leaving. And just their speed and like their style of offense has really just been a thorn in the Lakers' side, especially over the last 2 years where they're 6-1 against the Lakers. So while like there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance for me because I think AD and LeBron are both better than De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. And like, I think the Lakers defense, for as bad as it's been, if they can get Jared Vanderbilt and Gabe Vincent and Christian Wood back, or at least 2 of those 3 guys, like they should be able to be a better defensive team than the Kings. And then offensively, I think the Kings are a little bit better just with their collective shooting, offensive style. They're more organized offensively, but like it's a series I think the Lakers should win. And most of these games have been close over the last couple of years, but for whatever reason, Sacramento's really had their number. And like outside of Denver, this has been the team the Lakers have really struggled with the most in the West. Like going back, the Clippers had their number for a bit. They had won 11 in a row, but Lakers went 3-1 against them this year. So they kind of got rid of that. Minnesota has had some success against them, but beat them in the play-in tournament. They are 0-2, but now Karl Anthony Towns is out. And like just going through the matchups, and it's either like new teams, new cores, or the Lakers have done well against those teams. But like Sacramento is the exception. So it's looking like Sacramento is going to be in the 5-7 range. Lakers might avoid them entirely now. But if they do match up in the play-in, they got one more matchup next week. I'm interested to see if the Lakers can adjust, if AD can have a better game against Sabonis, but it's a road game. Lakers have not been as good on the road. And if they do end up matching up in the play-in tournament, it's hard not to think that the Kings are going to have the advantage just based on how the last 7 matchups have gone and how the Lakers have really struggled to contain their offense. So in a vacuum, I think the Lakers are better. I think they have a better chance of going further. I would pick them against the Thunder. I would pick them against the Timberwolves. Clippers to me is close to a coin flip, though I would slightly favor the Clippers. But like the Kings have just like if they're going head to head, I almost like lean Kings again, just based on the way that they've played against them over the last couple of years. But interested in what you guys think. Who's better, the Lakers or the Kings? I still say Lakers, even despite the results this week and the past couple of years. For those watching on YouTube, let me know in the comment section if you think the Lakers or the Kings are better. Again, I say Lakers, and I assume most of you will as well, but I'm just curious. So that'll do it for episode 2. I appreciate you guys watching and listening. Again, if you want me to answer one of your mailbag questions, send me a screenshot or show me that you've subscribed, are following, have downloaded, 5-star reviews, all that stuff. And I will be back next Monday. The tentative schedule right now is Mondays and Fridays, just with my schedule, with how much I'm working during the week with the travel and games basically every other day. That's kind of the schedule that works for me best. I was thinking maybe Monday and Thursday. So we'll see. I'm continuing to kind of play with it and see what works best. But Mondays for sure. I'm between Thursday and Friday. Right now it's looking like Friday. But next week I will have one episode with a guest. I will have a national NBA person. Not going to share it yet. Talking to a couple people and we'll see who I get. And then I will also have a solo show where we'll be talking through, maybe I'll do the matchups episode next week and then go through Mailbag as well. So again, thank you guys for watching and listening. This was really fun. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, be sure to subscribe, follow, download, like, drop a comment, drop a 5-star review, and I will talk to you soon.